Hello, and welcome to the Louise Elizabeth Podcast, formerly known as the Happy Lifestyles Podcast. Head over to episode 35 if you would love to learn more about the rebrand. This space is a space for me to talk about anything relating to holistic health living, mind, body, lifestyle, spirit, business, and so much more. In my opinion, health is a whole lifestyle, not just one thing that we work on. I will be getting transparent with you, sharing information that I have learned that has supported me and things that I'm currently learning and working on myself. Living a happy and holistic life has changed my world, and I hope to inspire you to do the same or give you the tools and resources that you can take away into your own life. I am a 620-hour registered yoga teacher. I am a registered holistic nutritionist and a professional network marketer in the wellness industry. Thank you for being here. Let's get started with today's episode. So I just need to pre-frame. We don't actually have, I know I've just cut myself off halfway through the sentence there. So we only have our bedroom and then the rest of the house is one big room. Vince is in the kitchen. He's going to be making noise and breakfast in the background. So hopefully you can't hear it too much. But anyway, this episode, what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through these hormones and bring a more masculine type of like logical side to exercising. And so I'm not going to dive into the different phases, but essentially just a quick kind of, because I will talk about them a bit. So you have different phases, right, of your cycle. So we have our menstrual phase, we have our follicular phase, we have our ovulation phase, and we have our luteal phase. And it goes in that order. Menstrual phase is kind of the inner winter. Follicular phase is like the inner spring, so things start waking up. Ovulation is summer, and luteal phase is fall. So I just wanted to pop those in there, and so that you can, when I mention those different phases, you can think about where they are. And then, like I said, this is going to be a more masculine thing because I personally am someone that if someone's going to tell me that I shouldn't be, or not shouldn't, that what's ideal for my health, what's ideal for my hormones, and the way to best utilize my body and exercise, I want the why. And for me, the why is understanding what hormones are pumping through my body at any point in my menstrual cycle. So that's what I'm going to go through quickly here with you. Well, quickly-ish. We'll see how long this podcast episode ends up being. I know my last couple ones have been shorter, so I'm hoping this one will be a little bit longer. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is the follicle stimulating hormones. So they're actually produced from your pituitary gland, and they're released into the bloodstream to regulate the function of the ovaries. Okay, so it stimulates the growth of ovarian follicles in the ovary before the release of an egg. So it actually starts the entire menstrual cycle again. So we have the menstrual cycle and the menstrual phase. So menstrual cycle is the whole month-ish, right? So it actually starts the whole cycle again after your period. So as you can probably imagine, follicular phase is the first phase after the period. The follicle stimulating hormones start pumping after your period. So this actually stops releasing in the luteal phase again. So if you think about this phase and you think about this hormone, what's essentially happening is things are starting to wake up again, right? We're starting the cycle again. We're kind of dusting off. So when we think about exercise kind of in that follicular phase, I guess I'm going to talk about each phase in exercising, but when we think about when we start to kind of dust off, we're building up more energy, we're building up more heat, we're kind of waking up, we're coming out of spring, we're stretching our body, we're starting to invite in some heat. But if we think about it, the days are still shorter in spring. We're still planting seeds. We're not quite ready in that summer busy hot energy yet. Okay. So another important hormone, these are the most common hormones that I'm going through, by the way, but they aren't necessarily the only hormones. They're just really common one for women in the menstrual cycle. So the next one we're going to talk about is estrogen. So for women in the menstruating years, estrogen is primarily produced in your ovaries. Small amounts are produced in the adrenals and fat cells as well. So estrogen is a pro-growth hormone. It is a part of regulating your menstrual cycle. It promotes cell division, promotes bone density. It actually fights heart disease and so many more things. And in your reproductive cycle, it participates in ovulation and is responsible for the thickening of the uterine lining. So it begins to rise at the start of the follicular phase, which is the first phase after our menstrual cycle. And it begins to building up of the uterine lining. Estrogen actually peaks in your luteal phase and drops drastically right before the start of the menstruating phase. So if we think about when it's pumping through us, it starts to rise. So it's a building up hormone, right? It starts building the uterine lining. It starts building up at the start of the follicular phase, and it's a gradual incline. And it gets quite high in ovulation, and it really, really, really peaks in the luteal phase. So if we think about, we're going to start building up heat, we're going to start building the intensity, we're going to start building the intensity in the follicular phase, like spring, you would start to bring in some heat, right? We're definitely going to bring some heat in ovulation, so you can still do some sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like I'm blanking on the word, like more fitness-based stuff in the ovulation phase, right? We're getting up there with our heat and what's going on. We're really starting to think about in the ovulation phase, where we just have more energy to burn, right? So more high intensity workouts. But then when estrogen really peaks, which is a building up hormone, when it really peaks is in the luteal phase. So the luteal phase is a really good phase to start doing some strength training and start doing some things to like build up muscle, and really focusing on that in the first half of our period. Our luteal phase. And then as we get to the second half, we'll focus on different things, but we'll talk about that in a bit. So estrogen is really useful when it's in balance. When it's out of balance, estrogen dominance conditions come from there. So overbuilding, over pro-growth hormone, which is a different topic for a different day. So the next hormone we're going to talk about is the luteinizing hormone. So it's produced and released in the pituitary gland. It's regulates the function of ovaries in women. In the first half of your cycle, it's required to stimulate the ovarian follicles to produce female sex hormones. So the first half, it's kind of waking up the ovarian follicles, right? We want the sex hormones. So the first half is building up to the point where the egg releases, and then we want the egg to be, whether we want to or not, what our body's going through is trying to actually fertilize said egg. And then halfway through the cycle, the surging in luteinizing hormone causes the mature egg to release from the ovaries, and ovulation happens. So the rest of the cycle, it supports the production of progesterone. So I won't get into luteinizing hormones and so much what it goes on and what it has to do with exercise, but just thinking about how in the first half of our cycle, we're getting ready to get to that point where ovulation hits. And when ovulation hits, that's when, assuming everything's in balance, that's when we're meant to be like on fire, feeling smooth, lots of energy. Like our body is trying to get pregnant, whether we want to or not, but that's literally what's pumping through us. And then in the second half, it's either trying to stay pregnant or releasing the egg so that this whole process starts again. So testosterone is mostly produced in the ovaries and adrenal glands for us women. Some testosterone is converted to estrogen. So the main role is to increase the woman's sex drive. And we tend to feel the effects right around mid-cycle, so when we're fertile, when ovulation happens. Testosterone levels are necessary in maintaining estrogen and progesterone balance. So that comes down to the adrenals, and the adrenals not over-excreting as well. So it rises right before ovulation and starts to fall once you've ovulated. So on those days where we are ovulating, the days leading up to it, and like especially on ovulation, in theory, are very high energy days. And as I already mentioned, when we're ovulating, this is a really, really, really good time to amp up our intensity. If you're new to like more intensity based exercise, this actually might be a really, 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 really great time for you to start working on your cardiovascular fitness. So if cardiovascular fitness maybe isn't your strength yet, and one of your goals is, say you want to run 5 or 10K, whatever it is, during ovulation is actually a really great time to start that running process, right? When you have all that energy, when you have that extra testosterone pumping through you on top of the estrogen as well. And so this is actually a really great time to bring that in. Or if you are a runner and you have a race, this is a good time to, if you can, obviously sometimes it's just like, this is the date that it's booked, but you can always look at it. You can be like, okay, June 14th is race date and I'm going to ovulate on June 10th. So I'm not going to be necessarily at my peak on June 14th, but I won't feel too bad actually, because it'll be just after I've peaked on energy, just things like that. Or if race days on your menstrual cycle, some women do really well exercising on their menstrual cycle, but if you're someone that experiences lower energy and all of that, like it might feel a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like grunt fest, and you might be super duper sore on the other side. Whereas if you do the race on your ovulation phase, it might feel in flow. You might still get a good time with menstruating phase. I'm not saying you're not, but it doesn't feel like a grunt. It feels like you're in flow. You're doing really well. Maybe you hit a PB and then you're not like super sore the next day or two, right? You don't need like a week to recover. You're still feeling pretty good. And then progesterone, so its main functions are regulating menstruation and supporting pregnancy. A shortage of progesterone can play a huge factor in the maintaining of pregnancy in the first trimester. The production of progesterone will start around ovulation and will drop when the egg is not fertilized and leaves the body. This then will signal the body to get ready for shedding the lining of the uterus. So progesterone is obviously super important if you're someone who is looking to get pregnant, and it does peak around, what's the word I'm looking for? I just blanked on my own. Well, I was looking at my notes and then I totally blanked. I forget what I was going to say about progesterone. Okay, anyway, it peaks, it peaks in the luteal phase. That's what I was going to say. And then it starts to drop in the menstrual phase. So I know I said I wasn't going to do this, but we're going to go through the 4 phases for exercising because it just organically makes sense to do that next. So the follicular phase, like I said, is the inner spring, right? So we're starting to think about our energy, in theory, should start rising if it hasn't already after the menstrual phase. You could think of like this is the time that you're waking up your body, you're starting to warm it up. This is actually the perfect phase to try a new workout or class. And in this phase, without getting into brain chemistry, we actually tend to be more open to different things, and our minds are open to trying and thinking and considering new things and getting creative and all that fun stuff. So when we try something new, it might align and land a little bit more in this phase. You can start to amp up your intensity levels in this phase to boost your metabolism and build more lean muscle, but still be mindful that your hormones are, especially if your hormones are already out of balance and you struggle with energy, especially in this phase, when we start to get more energy, this is the time where a lot of women will be like, okay, let's go, let's do this. I'm going for an hour run, and then you need to take a 2-hour nap because you're just so tired. This is still a good phase to maybe keep your exercise down to 30 minutes or maybe a little less intense. Or spend more time warming up, have a short burst of like high intensity, and then a nice long cool down from there. This is a good phase for that. The ovulation phase, so the inner summer phase, as you can imagine, this is the time where we have extra energy. You can amp up your intensities. Like I already mentioned, like if you're not really a cardiovascular based exercise person, this is a good time to do it and start it new, especially moving into luteal phase, because you'll still have a lot of energy versus like, okay, I've never run before, I'm going to try running, and you're going to try like in the first phase after your menstrual cycle when your hormone levels are still maybe lower and your body's not used to it, and you go for a run and then you can't walk for 4 days. And I'm laughing because we've all been there, right? So you can use that to your advantage and do it more in your ovulation phase. And then inner fall, the luteal phase is our next phase. So for the first half of it, you'll probably most likely still have a decent amount of energy. And this is, again, assuming everything's kind of pumping through you properly. Our hormones are producing properly. The system is more or less working relatively well. But it's a good time for lower impact activities. So this is actually a really great time. So we still have that burst of estrogen. It is still a great time to think about strength training and really building muscle, and maybe lower impact, like higher weights, or if you practice yoga, like more power vinyasa, like a lot of arm balancy holding stuff at the start. And then when you do start to feel your energy to dip, because you will start to feel it, you might start something more intense and just feel like, oh, okay, like this just isn't landing the same way it did 3 or 4 days ago. And that will take time to get there. If you're like, I can't possibly imagine, it takes time. And the art of paying attention to how you feel takes time. Like maybe when we're babies, we're super intuitive, but we lose that at some point along the journey. And even arguably still when we're kids, like there's kids that are hungry and don't even know, well, they do know it, but that's why they're grumpy, and then their parents are trying to feed them and then they're trying to argue with it, but we kind of lose that ability to be super tuned into our own bodies. That's through life experiences, through maybe not growing up in a household that had that particular type of language or support or environment. So you have to like go through and learn how to really be tuned into your body. So give it time. If you don't know how to do it, you can just maybe guess, okay, this is the second half of my luteal phase, so I'm just going to amp things down a little bit. But doing like core exercises and, like Pilates, bar, and then moving into more gentle kind of yoga or stretching or shorter periods of time, or doing like a full body workout instead of doing like the powerlifting sort of thing, depending on your exercise, you're obviously going to have to change it and manipulate it. And then menstrual phase, so your inner winter. So I'm just going to first say that I give you permission to do nothing if that's what your body needs. A nap also counts as a form of exercise during your cycle. So your hormones are actually at their lowest, right? So everything peaks and then it drops off real quick when you start shedding your lining. So if your body just doesn't have the fuel, you're putting your body into more stress, which in theory doesn't actually, well, not in theory, in reality doesn't support you if you have weight loss goals, for example, and you're like, well, I can't take days off, I'm being lazy. If you're going to take days off, take them off during your period. Your hormones dip. If your body's not there, if you're not feeling it, if you're tired, if you're fatigued, there's no energy in the tank, and if there are hormonal imbalances, you're particularly going to feel it the first day or two of your period. Putting your body into more stress and causing more of a stress response is not going to support you with your weight loss goals. It's actually going to do the opposite of what you're looking for. So if you feel called to exercise, go for it. Try to avoid high intensity. Maybe do some gentle yoga, some gentle movement, go for a walk, have a dance, whatever. But this is really a good time to work on your flexibility. So you could do more yin style. You can bring in your stretching routine if you've maybe you slack on it overall, and this is the time to bring it in and work that. Like for a lot of women, will be sore in kind of the low back, pelvis, and hip area, and that's just like through, especially if we get cramps, we get really tense there, right? Like we really tense up and we like really like struggle, and we're like, oh, it hurts, and that causes pain in the low back, causes pain in the hips. If you have to work a 9 to 5, so you have to go to work when you have your period and you sit all day at a computer, like that also isn't going to feel amazing in the low back and the hips, and arguably other places too. So work on flexibility and stretching. If you're like, okay, I still want to move my body, and I get it, like I enjoy moving my body, I still want to move my body, then move your body. Then just do it and go and move your body. Okay. So that is today's episode. It went a little bit different than I thought it would, but I'm actually super stoked on how it went. I really, truly struggled with just finding that balance of not exercising all the time. And when I first learned this, I was really like, okay, well, if I'm not doing anything, I'm not doing anything at all. It's just, I really struggled with that mindset. So I hope that going through the hormones and what's going through your body, you can modify your exercise routine. And days off are really important for recovery, and you can plan your days off based on where you're at in your menstrual cycle, instead of getting to the point where you essentially burn yourself out and you just don't have energy to exercise, or you're doing the opposite of trying to support yourself with your exercise routine and it's just not working anymore. So okay, I hope this episode was useful for you. I have something really exciting to announce that is actually going to be announced to social media world tomorrow. So if you're listening to this podcast tomorrow on Tuesday, if you're listening to this podcast today on Monday, November 7th, November 8th is when I am announcing it to the world, so you get a little advance. So if you follow me on social media, I've been hinting at it for the last week anyway, that I had something exciting coming. There was a 50 off deal that ends tonight at, it ends tonight at midnight. Yeah, whatever it is. I'm going to tell you what it is. Make sure you get on that before tonight at midnight to get that 50% off the price. But if you don't, I'll give you a coupon code that you can use for the next week. And it's specifically my podcast people, and or if you went to my yoga for your menstrual cycle workshop over the weekend, then you get this 20% code for the next week anyway. So I have been hinting at it. So essentially what I've done is I've created these, it's called, actually at the time of recording this, my rough idea of what it's called, because I'm pre-recording podcasts for the next couple weeks. But at the time of recording this, it is called The Waves of Your Menstrual Cycle, Yoga for Your Menstrual Cycle. And so what it is it's going to be 16, it is not going to be, it is 16 classes. And I've recorded full yoga classes, and I've recorded 4 for each phase of your cycle. So like I just went through, right? Different parts of our cycle is really useful to exercise different ways. And so I've got 4 classes for the menstrual phase. I've got 4 classes for the follicular phase. I've got 4 classes for the ovulation phase, and 4 yoga classes for the luteal phase. All are themed. All talk a little bit more about the hormones. All of them, I dive more into what it means, and how to nourish yourself in your inner summer, winter, fall, spring, etc. And you get lifetime access to it on Teachable. So it's on Teachable, and all the classes are there that you can go and click at any point to enjoy. And if you're listening to this, you have until midnight, 12 p.m. Let's do PST because it's easy to remember for everybody. 12 p.m. PST to get it at 50% off. So at $55 instead of $111. I know that's not exactly 50% off, but $111 tomorrow. If for whatever reason you didn't hop on the surprise that I've been hinting at for the last week, that's fine. If you listen to this and it's after midnight on November 7th, PST time, then I have a 20 off code that you can use for the next week. It's yoga 20 off. You type it into the website and you'll get 20% off the package as well. I'm so excited about this. I really truly I made it because P.S. I'll put all of that in the show notes if you're like, I don't remember any of that. I'll put that all in the show notes for you. But when I first thought about exercising at different points in my cycle, and I think back to especially handstands specifically, for those of you that know me know that I really was obsessed for a long time. I still love them, but I was obsessed for a long time. And for the longest time I'd say I don't know why I suck at handstands today and I didn't suck at handstands yesterday, or whatever story I was telling myself. And looking back now, I realized that a big part of that had to do with my menstrual cycle. Some days I just felt strong. Some days I could do the arm balance. Some days I couldn't. Some days I could go upside down. Some days I couldn't. Also had to do with my brain and where it was at and X, Y, and Z. So I'm so excited to bring these 16 classes to you. I'm recording them all I'm recording this way before this is releasing, by the way, if you can't guess by all of this and why it's confusing. But there's going to be at least 10 hours of yoga, that I'm certain of. Some of the classes will be a bit shorter, being mindful of what phase we're at, but there'll be at least 10 hours of yoga for you to do with me in the comfort of your home, all based on where you're at in your cycle, and you can have lifetime access to it. If I decide to modify or update any of those classes, you'll have access to that too. But I made this for those of you that are like me and you love yoga, and sometimes you love to go to studio, sometimes you love to do it at home. And especially what's nice about doing it at home is you can get specific on how you're feeling, where you're at in your cycle. So that's why I created this beautiful package for you, and I'm so excited to share it with you. So you heard it here first. Unless you are listening to this on Tuesday or later, then maybe you might have heard it on my social media. So as always, please tag me. I am Louise Elizabeth in your story so that I can share and let more people hear about the things that I have to offer on this podcast, the things I have to talk about. I would be so grateful. And if you could leave me a review, and if you have any topics that you want me to talk about, please reach out to me on Instagram. I have a list of things, a really big list of things I want to talk about, but I also want to be talking about things that are relevant to you, my beautiful listeners. So yeah, thanks for listening. Talk to you soon. Bye.